Hi, I'm Tristan Todd, Cloud Automation Specialist with Tintri. In the previous video in this series, I introduced you to Tintri's plugin for vRealize Orchestrator and showed you how it fits into your vSphere environment. We now have an extremely powerful tool in our private cloud toolbox. In this video, we'll explore the plugin's task library and show you how we combine tasks into workflows. We'll then deploy some real-world examples of workflows to cover day 1 and day 2 operations in our private cloud environment. Let's get started.
Okay, we're going to build a workflow that clones a template, takes care of guest customization, and even changes the CPU and memory settings for the user, and then powers on the VM. So in the Orchestrator Workflow Designer, go into Design Mode, and we're going to create this as a day 1 task. We've created this custom folder. We're going to create a new workflow, give it a clever name. We're going to, in this case, we're going to deploy an Apache web server from template. And we have the option of actually using workflow or stitching workflows together to take care of this. But I found that it's actually a lot more powerful to use actions. You can see the list of pre-configured Tintri workflows include operations like clone and sync VM and the like. And these are all very powerful, but you have even more power and flexibility in using actions. And that's what we'll do now. So we go ahead and close out of the workflow view and go into the actions, the Tintri library up near the top, and you can see all the individual actions. So we're going to use a combination of Tintri actions and vSphere actions stitched together here in a logical workflow. First, we'll clone from, we'll use a efficient Tintri clone to clone from our template. And then we'll go ahead and take care of the virtual machine CPU and memory customizations, and then we'll do a power on operation once we're all done. So all I do is I grab these individual actions and drop it into the visual workflow editor. What I'm doing here is basically building logical tasks in the form of actions. So you can see I've got a nice simple flow here. So all of our tasks are laid out in a nice simple order here. Let's take a look at some of the input parameters. So these input parameters should be logically mapped here and as the basis of all of the the resultant behavior. We can lock down the input parameter so that we don't actually query the user for this input. For instance, in this example, we're deploying an Apache web server from template. We don't necessarily want the user to have to select the template from a list. So we'll go ahead and pre-configure that for the user. Here we're going to make this a mandatory input, and we're going to set a default value. So we'll set the default value. We'll go ahead and pre-select the name of the template from our template folder. And I've got a minimalist CentOS template with the Apache web server loaded in it. There we go. We'll select this. And then we'll hide this bit of dialog from the user so they don't have to be bothered with this visually. In the interest of time, I've taken this workflow and added some notes and a few logic statements in it. So I've visually added some notes to show the different phases. I've added a sleep statement after the Tintri clone operation just to make sure that we've got our clone deployed. And then I've added a validation here where I go in and query vCenter with the name of the clone to make sure that the newly created virtual machine is instantiated, added inventory, and then we go ahead and take care of the CPU and RAM customizations. Okay, it's time to see this workflow in action. So we're going to play this at slightly accelerated speed, and you can see that I'm putting my CPU information, my RAM, my name, choosing a crash consistent snapshot, which is the default, choosing a guest customization and the number of clones that I need. Then looking at vCenter, I can see all of my tasks executing, my newly VM created. I can see that the customization is taking place. Then I can see the VM is powered on and then go in and verify that the CPU and memory settings have changed. So you can see they've updated based on our selections, and a green check mark indicates the workflow is complete. In the run task, I can look at the variables that were input based on our last workflow run. We're now going to build a BCDR as a service workflow. We're going to set replication and snapshot schedules for a VM. This is a day 2 task, so we'll put it in a day 2 folder. Create a new workflow, give it a clever name, set up goal BCDR. And then we're going to take Tintri tasks. We're going to set the snapshot schedule. We're going to check for configured replication targets, and then we're going to set scheduled replication. So you can see I'm dragging these tasks as an orderly part of the workflow components. Visual Editor is really nice in this regard. Now we're going to pre-configure most of the input parameters here. There are a number of input parameters, but we're going to hard code these so that the user doesn't have to select these. We're basically just going to align this service with our corporate standards for BCDR services according to our gold classification. So you can see that I've gone into the attributes for this workflow and I've hard coded some of the configurations. We're going to be taking snapshots every 15 minutes and then setting an hourly replication schedule based on our gold BCDR service standard. So I've pre-configured these, and what I'm going to do is then mask the inputs and only use a subset of these attributes as part of the workflow mapping. So if you go into schema mode in vRealize Orchestrator in the Workflow Designer, you'll see that we can map the way that the inputs and outputs are interacting between the different actions. So this visual binding concept is really important because you can actually kind of see the way that information is flowing from action to action, task to task, if you will. So we've got all of our information mapped here nice and cleanly. The presentation in this workflow is set so that I only require minimal information from the user. I'm actually doing a lookup to see what replication targets are configured. I'm using Tintri API calls for this, and this is pre-configured in the Tintri action. You don't have to worry about that code there. But then in action, this is a very fast workflow in that once I choose my individual virtual machine, the task runs very quickly to set up the snapshot schedule and the replication. And then what we can do is once this is executed, here I pick my replication target, the task runs very quickly, just a couple of seconds. I can go into my Tintri VM store and look at the VM and just visually verify that the protection policy is set up so that I'm abiding by that gold standard.
All right, we've got some day 1 and day 2 infrastructure tasks automated and delivered as IT as a service workflows. These services are now going to be delivered more consistently and much more quickly, thus helping reducing operating costs and increasing business agility. In the third and final video of this series, we'll integrate our new VMware vRealize Orchestrator workflows into a cloud management platform. In our case, we're going to be using VMware vRealize Automation. We can start then delivering self-service portals, multi-tenancy, and even chargeback. Thanks for watching.